again, you are welcome back to class. And in this lesson, Module 3 under the Scrum Master training, Module 3, Lesson 9, I believe, yes, this is Lesson 9. Still narrowing down on the Scrum Master, we shall now focus on the Scrum Master's role or the roles of the Scrum Master to the product owner, to the development team, and the stakeholders. In the last class, we concluded the roles of the Scrum Master in those meetings, the Scrum events, and the other two meetings we had. That's talking about the backlog refinements and the parking lots. So we've now understood how the Scrum Master facilitates those meetings, those engagements, what he or she looks out for, how to bring improvements, and all the rest. And those really are what we would be looking out for when we um, roll over into the practicals. Um, the coach, the agile coach, would be with you in all your sprint events while you're doing your daily stand up, your sprint planning, to ensure that whosoever is rolling as the Scrum Master for that sprint would be able to demonstrate all those value, all the facilitation, removing blockers, removing impediments, targeting risk, um, coordination, um, continuous improvement, and all the rest. All the rest. That is where all the knowledge you have acquired so far would begin to come to bear. So at this latter end of module 3, we now take a new turn to look at what the Scrum Master does for the product owner. What does the Scrum Master do for the developers? And that is the development team. And what does the Scrum Master do for the stakeholders? All right. Without much time to be wasted, let's jump over to the lesson. Module 3, Lesson 9. Okay, so we'll start from the responsibilities of the Scrum Master to the product owner. That's where we start from. What are the responsibilities of the Scrum Master to the product owner? From the Scrum Master to the product owner. The first one is managing dependencies and risk. Dependencies and risk would impact on the delivery of the product owner. The product owner um, should deliver on the sprints. Mind you, we said the product owner is the stopgap or the middle person between the stakeholders and the team. So when dependencies risk, I gave us an acronym earlier which we call RAID, standing for risk, assumptions, impediment, and dependencies. These would affect the delivery of the product owner, the owner of the product, right? So the Scrum Master would be supporting the product owner to ensure that dependencies and risk are taken care of. Of course, I mentioned in the last class also, or one of the classes, that how to deal with assumptions is right information, knowledge. So during the sprint planning and the backlog refinements, the Scrum Master wants to ensure that there's adequate knowledge. When there is knowledge gap, the Scrum Master also thinks out of the box and sees how the team could overcome such. I mentioned in one of the classes also that when we get to module 4, we would be looking at some of those ways by which the Scrum Master um, could use what we call Scrum best practices to deliver the best value of delivery for the team. So the Scrum Master here supports the product owner to deal with dependencies and risk. How do we deal with dependencies? Dependencies is to plan the workflow in such a manner that what is dependent on would be delivered first before what would be impacted. What do I mean by that? Let's assume that while we're building the house we mentioned, the plumbing team needs to lay the pipes before the concrete is poured. So when the when the plumbing team has not laid the pipe, the bricklaying team, or the, what should we call them now, the bricklayers, cannot deliver on their own task, right? So you want to plan your work in such a manner that while the plumbing team needs to have the story or the task of laying pipes in their sprints, they should have that task early, while the bricklaying or the bricklayers would be pouring the concrete as a task should be later. In actual sense, how I would plan such the workflow would be that we could bring the plumbing teams laying the pipe into sprint 1 and make pouring the concrete sprint 2 or sprint 3, meaning the plumbing teams would have finished what they need to do before the task of filling the concrete is ready to sprint on the bricklaying team's board. Am I sure you could get that? So in that sense, when you have dependencies come to play, when you begin to have multiple teams working together on the same product or on the same project. So the way to plan for it is the work that needs to be completed first needs to come to early sprints. The work that needs to be completed next would then need to go to latter sprints. So giving room for a team to have accomplished theirs before the second team starts theirs, because it means if you put the same effort together for both teams, while team A would be able to commit to that sprint, that particular story is not ready to sprint for the second team, right? So we need to make sure that there is that alignment of workflow such that the impact would not affect other teams. So that's how we plan for dependencies in Scrum. When you get to the product owner training, for those taking the product owner training also, we would explain further how all these things are planned for. There's what we call the story mapping. Story mapping is a technique or a practice whereby we align different stories in order based on their priorities. So in the illustration that I made, um, um, laying of pipes has higher priority to pouring the concrete. So we want to bring laying of pipe as a task or as a story earlier before the concrete will be poured. So that is one of the ways we deal with dependencies going forward. But again, when we cross over to the product owner training, we will be able to expand on that more. Risk, I'll just talk briefly about risk also. There is what we call ROM or roam, right? So we say that you roam the risk. I gave us an acronym for RAID, which stands for risk, impediment, assumptions, and dependency. So what you do to the R, which stands for risk, is to roam it. And what does roam stands for? R stands for resolve. So you need to identify which of those risks can you resolve. The ones that you can get the solution for, you would resolve them. There are some other risks you cannot resolve that you need to own. O stands for own, right? There is another you need to accept, and there's the last you need to mitigate. The difference between owning a risk and accepting a risk: owning means that risk that needs to be dealt with would now be assigned to someone who will own the risk. So in that stead, it means the risk itself becomes a work item, a task. You then now assign it to an individual that has capacity to work on that risk. That's what that ownership means. Someone would own it and deal with it. In scaled Scrum, for instance, Scrum at Scale, which is a scaled Scrum framework by Dr. Jeff Sutherland, um, as an escalation process. So when a matter is escalated upwards, it would be captured. It would become um, a story. At the lower team level, it was an impediment. When it becomes escalated upwards, it becomes a story that would be assigned to one of the senior management team members to deal with it. So that's what that ownership means. Then the accept of the risk. This is a kind of risk you cannot do anything about it. You just need to go head on and face whatever the consequences of that risk is. Then the last one also talks about mitigating risk, where you um, buffer for the impact of that risk, where you make the impact of the risk less. That's what it means to mitigate the risk, right? So that's one of the things the Scrum Master does for the product owner. Other things is collaboration and support. The Scrum Master is there to support the product owner all through the way in anything being done, including facilitation of those meetings, ensuring that the product owner has more knowledge agile wise. I've mentioned again and again that in most organizations, you would find out that the product owners were project managers under the traditional ways of working waterfall that got converted into product owners. So they may not have sound knowledge of the clear duties of that role. So a good Scrum Master is collaborating and supporting the product owner. Then of course, he enforces Scrum values and principles, which is similar to what I've just explained. Guiding and supporting and coaching the product owner in this case, ensuring that the product owner himself understands Scrum and is able to follow the practices, the value, the pattern of Scrum. What you could find on the field sometimes is a product owner that has the old mindset of the project manager. So, as a project manager happens to be the boss, but the product owner happens to be a member of a Scrum team. So, there's a huge gap in those two roles. So the Scrum Master is there to support the product owner to grow in agile knowledge, to begin to see value from agile and to begin to develop. Then, of course, the product owner, the Scrum Master supports the product owner also in facilitating or co-facilitating the backlog refinement, which was what we took time to look at in some of the lessons we've had um, um, just some time ago. Then, while the product owner is engaging with the stakeholders, a smart Scrum Master wants to be there with the product owner so that he can also have good picture of what the product being developed is. I say clearly that the Scrum Master's role has to do with the process of work. That's what the Scrum Master focuses on. But there are two legs the Scrum Master should balance on. The Scrum Master also needs to balance on the product leg, needs to have what I often term the technical awareness on the product being developed. When you have good knowledge of the product being developed, you'll be able to support the teams better. And one of the ways you would really do that is joining the product owner, supporting the product owner when those stakeholders engagements are going on. Then, of course, towards the release plan, there's what we call the release plan. The release plan is any work that has been fully developed before it gets deployed to the end users. There needs to be a release plan. For those going through the product owner training, we'll take some time to look at the release plan, where in this case, some certain conditions need to be met. There should be good plan for contingencies, for emergencies when some of those products or features are released to the end users. So the Scrum Master is always there to support the product owner and, of course, ultimately for continuous improvement. In every way that the Scrum Master could ensure that the burden of the product owner gets lighter, the Scrum Master is expected to jump in and support the product owner. So that will be the end of this class. If you have any question, please note them down and send them across. I'll be glad to shed some more light on those gray areas and we would be able to move further on same. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next class. Bye for now.